Setting up the meeting. I'm just gonna wait till it loads fully and then I'm gonna assign you host.
Okay.
And you'll take care of the co-host, or do you want me to make your co-host right now?
Go ahead and make Margie co-host too.
Make co-host,
Perfect.
and then I'm gonna assign you host. Once I know this is good. And make host.
Great.
Cool. You'll take care of the co-host, or do you want me to make your co-host right now?
Go ahead and make Margie co-host too.
Sounds good. We're live on YouTube, so I am going to take my leave and post this on the website. If you need anything, go ahead and text me or call me, okay?
Thank you very much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Where is everybody?
Good morning, Tom. It's Margie. I think there is a lot happening this morning, so we're going to give folks another minute or two, but I know there are a lot of competing demands on people's time, some interesting stuff happening today, so we are going to give a minute before we open up and plow through this.
All right. I'm going to be quiet.
Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah, good to see you.
Morning, Margie.
Good morning, Arthur. We're just giving another minute for folks to sign on here. I know there's a tremendous amount of competition for people's time this morning, so we're just going to give them a minute and then we'll get going.
Okay.
Good morning, Arthur.
Good morning, Deborah. Thanks for sending out the link again.
Of
Appreciate
course.
it.
All right, good morning. We are going to get started. Good morning. This is Margie Tatro with GridWorks. It's Thursday, July 28th, and in this series of conversations about the Advanced Inverter Working Group here in New Mexico, we're pleased that you could all join us. I know there's a tremendous amount of competition for your valuable time, and we very much appreciate your working on these difficult issues around interconnection for the benefit of all New Mexicans. Our agenda today is going to include updates, if Arthur has any, from the PRC perspective for the group. And then I will go through the outline. It's more than an outline, actually has some content in it, but the draft report that this working group will be preparing and turning into the commission before mid-September. So I'll go through that just so you know what's in it. And then we'll talk later in the meeting about the next steps for that report. The heart of today's meeting is going to be a discussion from the subgroup who's been working on the communications interoperability proposal for this particular topic. And as many of you know from the last meeting, we had an overview of the three IEEE 1547 eligible protocols from Bob Fox from the SunSpec Alliance. He talked a little bit about where those protocols came from and what their uses are. And now we've had a really fabulous subgroup take a look at what a proposal could look like for New Mexico. And so Travis Dorr and John Hawkins, Jerry Delgado, and Tracy Van Slyke, along with Michael Ropp, have put that together, and they'll be talking about that and asking for discussion and comments from the rest of the group. Then we'll summarize our next steps, which I know you're all going to be so disappointed to learn that we'll only have 3 more meetings after today to get our report in shape for the commission. But again, thank you for being here. And with that, I'd like to turn, let's see, there's a question in chat. Oh, Andrew says, hello, okay. Let me turn it over to you, Arthur, to give any updates on proceedings or any other announcements that are important for this group.
Thank you very much, Margie, and thank you all for joining us again. How time flies. Really, the only updates are in continued progress on implementation of the community solar program. As I indicated last time, the final rule was formally published by the state on July 12th, so it is in effect. In effect means that we are proceeding with the hiring of a program administrator. There is a contract that is currently being reviewed by legal and the state for approval. Once that contract is approved, the program administrator and commission staff and commissioners who are involved in community solar will sit down and work out the plan for issuing the request for proposals for community solar projects. So you know that RFP has been, a draft of it was put together by the Cadmus Group under a contract that we had in the last fiscal year. And it was presented in terms of kind of what the substance of the RFP looks like in the workshop that we held on June 13th. We're not issuing the RFP until we sit and talk with the program administrator, so hold your horses. But the main elements of the request, which is the evaluation factors and the scoring for the evaluation and elements of who's eligible to bid into this and certain limitations are all actually in the rules. So if you want to read the rule, then you'll get a pretty good understanding of what the RFP is going to look like. Of course, there's a lot more pages to it, forms and things like that. So as soon as we can. The commission also now has a final report from our outreach group that was hired to propose ways to serve the low-income community. As you know, the community solar projects have a 30% carve-out for low-income subscribers, and also involvement by low-income organizations that serve low-income customers. And their report is also available. These documents should be in the implementation docket, which is 22-00020-UT, and you can find them there. We also just posted them on the National Community Solar Partnership platform page. So if you're a member of the NCSP group, then you can find them there. Not much on that. The other related proceeding that's had some updates is the GridWorks sponsored webinar series for grid modernization wrapped up last week with a kind of review of where GridWorks is putting its ideas together for recommendations to the commission on what should go into a rulemaking for grid modernization. If you have a special interest in that, all the documentation and recordings of the webinar series, there were 10 of them, are available on the GridWorks website. And Deborah, if you can, at some point, just stick a link in our chat so that people can access that. We're hoping that GridWorks will have its recommendations to the commission in August, right? So that the commission can determine how to act going forward, whether to issue a rulemaking, whether to have more workshops to flesh out some of the ideas, that kind of thing. But all that is proceeding apace. So that's it from me. I'm going to turn it back to Marge. I do see Commissioner Hall has joined us, and she's monitoring this. She has a great interest in the technical aspects of what we're doing. Morning, Commissioner.
Good morning. Yes, I'm very pleased to be here. I don't want to take any time talking. I really appreciate everybody being here and continuing to work. You're really vital to the cause.
Kevin Cray from the Community Solar Advocacy Group is here. Morning, Kevin.
Morning, Arthur. I just want to take a quick moment and just express my appreciation for the commission continuing to move forward in an expedited fashion on the community solar process and getting the administrator brought on board and really setting things up for continued success there. Don't want to belabor that at all, but just wanted to express my gratitude and appreciation for that. So thank you all.
Great, thank you very much. Margie?
Are there any other questions for Arthur or Commissioner Hall? Okay, well, let's proceed then with the first item on the agenda of technical substance, and that is the draft report. So what you all received from Deb Shields with yesterday's recent announcement of today's meeting, both the proposal that we'll talk about shortly on inverter communications protocols, but you also received a draft document that I will share now, which is work in progress for the report that this group will be turning into the commission in September. So Jim, I see you have your hand up. Now it's gone. Did you have a question, Jim? Go ahead.
Yes, Jim. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. I didn't hear any update on the interconnection policies and when we can expect a rule to come out there. I was just hoping we can get something on that.
I have no additional information from last time, from the last session. The drafting of the order is in the hands of the Office of the General Counsel. And as you recall, the record in the proceeding closed on June 27th. General Counsel has been exceedingly busy filling in some holes. So we're pushing it along. I don't have anything to report.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question, Jim. Thanks for keeping us connected to that. So I'm going to share my screen here, and really the point of this part of the agenda is to let you know what is in this draft document. It will be, after today, it'll be sent out to all of you by a week from today, August 4th, so that you can really study it and provide comments for our August 11th meeting. So we're now going to have a pace for the next month where I'll turn out to you a draft document a week later. In preparation for our following meeting, we'll ask for you to be prepared to talk about or send comments. And then we'll do that 2 times with the hope of having a pretty wrapped up document by our meeting on September the 8th. So I'm just going to run through what's in this work in progress. It is very draft. It includes, here's the table of contents I'll show you a little bit. There will be an executive summary. There'll be a motivation that describes how this effort got started and how it connects to the phase 1 activities that were occurring last year regarding interconnection. Then right now there are 5 recommendations in the draft report. One, which needs your input, is on items that would be recommended for a rule and items that might be better accommodated in the utilities technical interconnection requirement documents, or TIRs. There's a recommendation on what this whole set of requirements is applicable to, which types of systems and new systems versus systems that are already been installed. So the applicability of this to New Mexico. Then a recommendation regarding the reference point of applicability and how that gets defined, because that becomes important for implementing the IEEE 1547 standard. There's a recommendation number 4, which the subgroup had been working on this for a couple of months now, and it talks about the categories for defined DERs, the default functions and settings for these autonomous functions of inverters. And then the 5th recommendation will be the subject of today's conversation. What should the communication interoperability protocols look like and how should they be applied? And fortunately, we have some fabulous technical expertise from the utilities who've helped us put together this proposal for the group. So that is what is contained in the report. Each recommendation, 4 and 5, have multiple pieces to them. And so I'm not going to go through those now, but you will see them in the draft. And then there's a long series of annexes of supporting information, background that will include the activities that the Commission has on record for this interconnection activity. Also, we've hopefully I haven't asked IREC directly. I see Brian is on the phone. We'd like to put in the latest version of the Advanced Inverter Adoption Decision Matrix that IREC has been continuously helping us through the sets of decisions and options related to those decisions in terms of adopting this new IEEE standard. So we'd like to put that in there. We think it's a very useful reference for not just decisions that we will have recommendations for, but other issues related to the adoption of advanced inverters. Annex C will include a description of how we came up with this report and the list of the participants and the organizations they represent, with a special recognition to the 2 subgroups who have been putting in considerable amount of time and energy into the details of these proposals. Then there are technical recommendations that will go into the annexes D, E, and F for recommendations 3, 4, and 5. What we're attempting to do is pull out the essence and the snapshot recommendation in the text and then leave much of the detailed background, technical background in the annex. And we're happy to move information back and forth, but we thought that it's important to record and document all the technical detail that has been presented on these topics, yet the recommendation could stand by itself in the body of the report. As you see currently from this table of contents, the recommendations themselves may be less than 10 pages and will probably have an equal amount, at least, of technical support in the annex section. So that is what's contained in the draft that you received yesterday and that you will receive an updated version of by August the 4th. So I wanted to just orient you to the document at this point and ask for any comments that you might have about the organization as opposed to necessarily the technical detail. So with that, let me pause and see if there are questions or if there are any particular sections you all would like me to scroll to for conversation.
Hi, Margie. This is Brian with IREC. I was just wondering that first chapter about the what's recommended for the rule versus the TIR. Is that just referencing the rest of the recommendations sections, or is there actual content in there about recommendations?
There is actually some content, Brian, and I've extracted it. Let me go to that so you can see. I've drafted a table actually that has come out of the conversation. So let me go ahead, and that needs work by the group clearly, but here's what's intended for recommendation number 1 is to put in a table that would list the items that could be in a rule and items that could be better suited perhaps in the technical interconnection requirements documents. So here's what we've got in that so far. Things that might go in the rule would be, what the rule is applicable to, some definition of how the reference point of applicability would get defined and documented, the categorization determination from the subgroup that was working on that, the automated functions and default activation settings, and perhaps the setting ranges, although specific settings are envisioned to perhaps be in the TIR documents. And then what you'll hear more today about the communications interoperability proposal is going to suggest that the 3 eligible protocols defined by IEEE would all be acceptable in New Mexico, with perhaps some very specific communication requirements that would be site specific get documented in the TIR documents or some other type of reference document. So Brian, that's what's in there to date. It's certainly open to suggestion, comment, review, and discussion by this group, but that's what we've got in there for now.
Okay, thanks. Makes sense.
Yeah, this is Arthur, and I guess I would just say one thing on the heading here, elements suggested for an interoperability rule. It is unlikely that the commission is going to establish a separate rule for interoperability. So I would say interoperability policy as part of the interconnection rule. I know that's a little bit more wordy, but that would be more accurately representing it.
Perfect. Good. Thank you, Arthur. That's helpful.
Oh, and all those items listed aren't really related to interoperability except for the last one, right? So you might want to generalize that.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, we know for sure that the that the current interconnection rule revision proposal includes the applicability of DERs to 1547/2018, references to the category of autonomous functions, what the default settings would be for that, and then pointing to a TIR for the other components here. So it's splitting, and it kind of follows what IREC had suggested in terms of the decision points. It's just that we really can't shoehorn the latter efforts here, the setting ranges and the communications protocols, into the existing consideration of the interconnection rule, except to the fact that parties have commented on it in this last iteration. And I know that IREC did propose quite a number of technical aspects to it. And that's one of the reasons why the Office of General Counsel is being very careful in going through that, because a lot of it is pretty technical for a rule, and we're trying to sort out what really should be in the rule versus what really should be in these guidelines.
Understood. Thanks.
Great. And obviously we'll synchronize this with whatever might come out of the interconnection rule if it comes out in the next couple of months. So we're kind of walking this dance of integrating between these two, but trying to be sure they're consistent. Great. Thanks, Brian and Arthur, for those comments. Any other questions about the report? And I will come back to our process for soliciting comments on that and the process for that when we come to the close of today's meeting. All right. I think at this point, we're ready to turn the meeting over to the subgroup. I wanted to thank John Hopkins and Travis Dorr and Jerry Delgado and Tracy Van Slyke and Michael Robb for working last week to come up with a proposal regarding the communications protocols. And this was started after last meeting's presentation by Bob Fox of the SunSpec Alliance, who I think did a great job of describing the 3 protocols listed in the standard, a little bit about their history and their uses. And so at this point, I think I will turn the presentation over to Travis with support from any of the rest of the team. I know John and Michael are both on the line. I have not seen if Jerry or Tracy, are you on? Let's see. Don't see Jerry or Tracy yet.
Tracy's
but
here.
Oh, Tracy. Oh, that's your T Van Sly. Okay, I wondered. Thanks, Tracy. I didn't recognize your acronym there.
I'm incognito.
Okay, great. Thanks. And Tracy is from El Paso Electric. And so thank you, Tracy, for your and Jerry's help on this. So Travis, let me turn it over to you and let me know how I can support you. Would you like me to put our write-up on the share screen, or what would you like?
Yeah, I can take the wheel when it comes to sharing. And yeah, thank you very much, Margie, for the great intro. Am I coming through clearly with my microphone? Okay, just want to make sure. All right, so let's share. Oh, host disabled participant screen sharing.
Hold on, that we can.
Which is
fix
understandable.
that. Okay.
Right?
Sorry, you should be good to go now.
Then I click share. Okay, I think that worked, right?
Yes, we can see. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know if I'll ever get used to Zoom. I'm always using Microsoft Teams. Okay. Yeah, because I can't see the chat now. So if anything comes up in the chat, please let me know. Unless you know how to make the...
Great. I'll watch the chat, Travis.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Travis Dorr, and I'm an electrical engineer with Excel Energy's DER integration team. And one of the many hats I wear is the Smart Inverter hat for that IEEE 1547 2018 standard, which I plan to just refer to as 1547. So whenever I say 1547, I mean to refer to the latest 2018 revision. So yeah, I just brought up on the screen there for everyone. I think this was sent out to the working group prior to the meeting. If you didn't have a chance to review it before the meeting, it should not be an issue. Just know that I'm probably not going to read word for word. I'm probably just going to focus on like bulleted and bold items here. So I guess I'll zoom in a little bit just to make it a little easier to let's see. So yeah, so the subgroup that we're mentioning here is really like a 1547 subgroup for the larger working group. And we have some names here that I wanted to provide as well. We got John, Jerry, Tracy, Mike, and Margie. Thank you all for your extremely valuable and critical to the success of this subgroup input. So let's see, we recognize the need to move forward with communications and interoperability functions for DER resources. And so our job recently has been providing recommendations and a proposal. This proposal is still very much in a draft. We're in the early stages of developing, just trying to wrap our heads around this extremely technical matter. And it really differs among the utilities. So there's a lot to learn from each other. Major issues that we found are cybersecurity, that was a main concern, but then also control system capabilities and information system capabilities as well. So here in bold, we say all DER shall include provisions for a local DER communications interface per 1547. So what we're really trying to say here is that the DER needs to have a port for which you can have some two-way communication. So when it says provisions, I also have up, this is publicly available. This is just on Google. If you look for it, it's from NREL. It was back in like October of 2019. So it's needing a little bit of update, but it's still pretty applicable. For instance, I just wanted to share this when I'm talking about that bulleted item. I'll go back to that bulleted item real quick. All DER shall include provisions for a local DER communications interface per 1547. So just to give maybe a little more color on it, I wanted to point out, all DER shall have provisions for an interface capable of communicating to support the information exchange requirements specified in this standard for all applicable functions that are supported in the DER. I just noticed that word applicable, and I was thinking, that we might want to have a discussion in the subgroup at some point as to what we mean by applicable, like what kind of exceptions do we make to so maybe we could come up with like a list of the applicable functions at some point. And please feel free to chime in at any point. I won't feel interrupted. I want to have some discussion, so feel free to jump in.
Let me jump in there then, Travis. This is Brian with IRIC. I was just curious. It sounded like, so to me, and I think this was discussed in 1547.2 development quite a bit. There's having the provision for a communications interface isn't entirely clear what that means. Mm-hmm. And basically, I think most, in terms of inverter DER, most inverter manufacturers will have some sort of gateway that would be required in order to provide that communications link. And so the question to me becomes, is there a requirement to actually provide communications, at the site at the time, the application is submitted? Then that it would be obvious that, you need to include that gateway or whatnot. But if it's not clear ahead of time that any specific port is needed, then, that may or may not be included. And then it really becomes a question of, do you want backwards compatibility, and do you want to force backwards compatibility on DER sites that may never connect to a communication system?
Okay, yeah, good point. Yeah, that definitely requires some further discussion. So let me know if I am, hitting or missing your point here, where, what do we mean by provisions, right? I think that in the standard and in the testing standards as well, if it's certified, if this DER is certified, then it's going to have the provisions that we need, whatever that means, right? So could these provisions be something like just a simple port, right? Like could be an Ethernet port, right? For like TCP/IP. Could it be like a Wi-Fi card, right? Is that
Right, yeah, well, I guess that's where provisions is a little unclear, because you could have an additional component that could be added to a DER unit, aka inverter, that would provide that capability or provide that port. So in between those two items, you might have some other type of communications that wouldn't be able to be directly linked up to outside world with one
like
of the
through
three.
an aggregator?
It could be, yeah. So I mean, that's one question that has come into play. This gets really in the weeds really quickly, but so in California, it was defined that an aggregator pathway would be something that would be supported, and some aggregators, or at least would be aggregators, were saying they wouldn't need to use one of the three IEEE standard protocols in order to communicate with systems. They could use their own proprietary systems, which they do today. And so the question becomes, if you were to be a part of an aggregation, would you actually need to provide that 1547 style port, which wouldn't be used in an aggregation? So yeah, so that it's a little unclear unless there's like a communication system that you're actively hooking up to at commissioning time, what is required.
Yeah, and I know I just jumped a couple slides forward, but I think that your point is kind of hitting on one of these earlier decisions that we need to make, right? Like specifying protocols and ports to be used.
So Travis, let me add in, thanks for that, Brian. Let me add in that this first bullet that Travis was describing, that I'll take responsibility if the language isn't correct. The conversation among the subgroup was, are some DERs, like smaller sizes, they be exempt from this requirement to have a communications interface? And the conversation amongst the subgroup was, well, we really want these resources of any size to be able to be communicated with and ultimately have some interface and control to be supportive of the grid. So we didn't want to exclude any size of systems from these requirements. That was really the genesis of this particular bullet.
That sounds right to me. And I could provide some more, but I saw John, you raised your hand. I don't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, and one of the points I wanted to make is actually we might want to get through some of the other bullets, because there's the cybersecurity piece of that. Remember, there was a discussion around the aggregation piece, and so I think we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I believe, just as utilities have, they aggregate up, we do this today, demand response as a larger entity, but we do it ourselves. We will, that's why the size I don't think is a we want it down to even the smallest size, is because in aggregate it gets really big. And so if we do that through aggregation, there's some granularity pieces that we would want to address, and there's also some security pieces where we're dual homing some of these things that are going directly into a control system at the utility, which would then be dual home to the internet. And so I think we'll talk about that as we go in through some of these other bullets.
Agreed. Okay, just pausing for a moment in case there's further thoughts to share on that. Okay, so yeah, moving on to the next bullet here. We want to include in the proposal allowing any of the three eligible protocols to be employed by the electric service providers who are allowed to implement any of the three different parts of the distribution system, depending on the use case and infrastructure in place at a given location. And so basically, we're trying to separate out the rule from, utility documents. So rather than a rule saying, you need to use one of these three or multiple, really it's more the rule saying utilities need to document how they consider and implement the standard for requiring communication. So when we say the three eligible protocols, I just want to scroll down to the table here to just illustrate what protocols we're talking about. These are the three here. I think by far the most common is SunSpec Modbus, but I think that's where we were having some concerns with cybersecurity. So there's still a lot of discussion within utilities and among utilities and among the subgroup as to how we document which protocol we're going to choose. So just want to scroll back up now and pause for a moment to see if there's any discussion on that needed.
So, yeah, I have a question. Steve Wormlinger from SMA. A comment on which protocol would be used. So that I think it's widely recognized that the Modbus is kind of the preferred for local communications. So when you're putting this requirement, if I have an inverter that has a Modbus port, that may not necessarily be what you want to tie to as your network interface.
Yep.
Right. You might want to provide a separate network interface that has the cybersecurity for who you're communicating with. And then that device communicates with my Modbus port on the inverter. Is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah, that's one scenario that you just made. Yeah.
Okay.
And not necessarily trying to prescribe that in the rule, but if anything, just address what you just said in your utility documentation.
All right.
Basically, You're going to need to set out, your requirements for installers, right? Fortunately, I believe if it's certified, then it really takes out a lot of the guesswork as to what to expect the inverter is going to be capable of doing. That kind of gets back to Margie's point. That was kind of on Brian's point, which is, if it's certified, then you're going to know what to expect, whether it's small or large, whether it's just a residential rooftop or a large solar garden. Doesn't really make a difference what size of a total system we're talking about. We're working with inverters that are certified, so we know what to work with.
Yeah, but I guess it gets into the question of if I have a small site with one inverter, then I'm compliant because I have one Modbus port, right? But let's say I have 10 inverters and each of them have a Modbus port. Is that compliant with your first bullet, or is the site owner responsible to provide some type of aggregator or gateway device that aggregates all those 10 inverters?
That would be up to the utilities.
Okay.
Right. It'd be up to the utilities to document that.
Okay. Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what we're trying to, the first thing I was really trying to do when the subgroup met to discuss this proposal was to ensure flexibility among all stakeholders. Stakeholders meaning not just utilities, right? Aggregators, installers. That kind of brings me up to another point I wanted to share, if I can jump to something else real quick. It's also on this section in the NREL highlights document. If anybody wants a copy of this, let me know. There's kind of a couple different copies, but there's like a whole section on interoperability, and that's what we're focused on with this proposal the most. They provide some value and requirements, and then this slide that I just showed a moment ago, where it kind of talks about applicable functions, but I also wanted to show this slide where it says potential stakeholders, right? One thing that I just recently thought of, sorry for not sharing this sooner, Margie, but one thing that the subgroup might want to discuss soon is kind of identifying who can be, right, the area EPS operator, the aggregator, the operator, the owner, right? Maybe not necessarily including that in the rule, but maybe having utilities think about this and document the various stakeholders as they see. Because there's a lot of players in this.
And so Travis, if I could add the essential rationale for allowing any of the protocols to be used is that the particular site or specific communication systems in place at a specific site may be different in various parts of the state and jurisdiction. So in one place, maybe a aggregation of DER, we're going to interface with the SCADA, in which case it's likely that they'll be able to, speak DNP3, but it may not be the case. It may be some other local energy management interface. And so the point was that it will be simpler for either the inverter or a gateway that translates between the inverter and the utilities control system. It'll be easier to get those to talk than it would be to change a whole utility communication infrastructure. So that's the rationale behind allowing any of these protocols to be used and allowing them to be different even within a certain utility, depending on the site situation. Is that a fair representation, John, Travis, and Tracy?
Yes, that's I think that's what we talked about is, and frankly, what we're trying to do is we're trying to keep the flexibility because we're talking about a subject that's not fully baked in the industry yet, right? And so this gives us the ability, and some of it'll depend on your physical transport layer, right? It'll say, hey, if I'm talking over LTE, right, cellular, maybe that's one way, and I might send a protocol down that one. But if I have a lower bandwidth, I'm trying to do it through, somebody's trying to do it through their AMI system and it doesn't support, right, then we might have that ability. So some of this isn't completely baked in industry yet, and there's still a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah, thank you, John. Okay, so yeah, just moving on, just jumping to the next bulleted bold item here. Interoperability capabilities of advanced inverters shall be tested according to IEEE 1547.1-2020. I did want to provide a little bit more color on that as well. We were waiting all this time for UL 1741. It's the third edition of it, which includes, we want to include supplement SB. We were waiting for this to get published. It finally happened in September of 2021. And that's why 18 months after that is like end of March. And so that's why we're looking to implement the phase one of all this, the autonomous grid support functions. We were wanting to wait until end of March, maybe beginning of April of 2023, because of the 18 months after the publication of that supplement SB. And so just to kind of give a little more color as to what this standard is, this 1547.1-2020, I did want to share that. Let's see. So, 1547 requires inverters to demonstrate the ability to ride through excursion, deviations in voltage frequency and adjust active power. So the changes to the 1547 standard in the 2018 revision were incorporated into the testing standards document IEEE 1547.1-2020 to harmonize with these updates. A third edition of UL 1741, including supplement SB, was published in September of 2021 with reference to IEEE 1547-2018 and IEEE 1547.1-2020. As industry and test labs started to implement these new test procedures, issues with certain test procedures in the .1 standard were identified that required clarification. And so by September of 2021, that 1741 SB clarified these testing issues. So what I'm trying to say is that compliance to the 2018 1547 standard is now verified by certification to the 1741 SB and this .1 standard. So I just wanted to provide a little clarification, is that we kind of have a couple different testing standards that we're working with here. And the .1 standard is a lot easier for me to read than the 1741 SB. So I tend to refer to this one, but I also didn't want to leave that 1741 SB out of the conversation. I didn't know if maybe if we should reword this. I was going to ask, I guess, the subgroup's thoughts on that at some point and just didn't get around to it until now.
Travis, this is Steve Wormlinger from SMA. I would think somewhere in this document, do you make reference to the entire equipment being certified 1741 supplement SB, third edition? Okay. Then in that case, it would be technically correct if you said both. It's IEEE 1547.1 2020 and UL 1741 third edition supplement SB.
Okay. Thank you.
Good.
So I know I keep deviating from what's written here. I'll try to stick to it just for sake of time. So we decided to break this interoperability proposal into two phases. One that kind of focuses on one of the two ways of communicating, and then the other phase being the second way of two-way communication, where we want in phase one to have monitoring requirements, and then phase two have the control or interoperability requirements, and then phase three would just be the full functionality of these interactions. Moving forward, when we go to I guess provide documents to the public. Oh yeah, Midhat. Hi.
Yeah, Midhat with IREC here. I think you alluded to this earlier, but it might be better to refer to the autonomous functions as phase one, and then find a way to pick up from here. I don't know, phase two, phase three. Otherwise, it might be confusing to some readers what you're referring. I see you added that note there, but it might not be sufficient to folks that are reading it for the first time.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. This was phase one of the communications proposal, whereas phase one of the autonomous proposal, yeah, when we say phase one without necessarily disclaiming which proposal we're talking about, will be confusing. Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you. And I guess another note is, we mentioned control capabilities. I'm thinking that we might want to use a different word when we just make public facing documentation. I think some folks don't like that word very much, right? Coming from their state and their utilities. So I don't know if interoperability could be used, or interactive, or it's just something that we'll want to figure out before we create public facing documentation. that might get, some headlines that, the state and utilities are trying to control things, so maybe more of an interoperability, interactive, right? Like more of like a friendly, cooperating sort of word.
Well, Travis, this is Arthur. While I don't shy from controversy, your point is well taken. I think interactive probably will work for these purposes. A lot of folks out there do not see utility control over their devices as an unmitigated good. So, so we just have to be aware of that.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I keep tangent off. I know that my time is almost up, so I'm just gonna kind of keep going. I referenced this table earlier. Let me know if you want me to go back to that table or to anything else. But just for the sake of moving along, this architecture shown in this image here shows that there's challenges to the way that communication and interactive functions will be implemented because of the various stakeholders involved needing to communicate two-way communication, that is. Okay, and then I wanted to jump to some very valuable input from IREC that was shared before. We kind of went through the whole gambit of what should be considered for decisions. This is the snippet that's related to the snippet from that document. These are decisions related to communications that we wanted to make sure we make check marks on. And then let me just keep going for a moment to see what I have on this last slide. Yeah, this is from the standard. And it's like that table above, that table 1. This table 41 is similar to that table 1, except this provides how, it's TCP, IP, Ethernet and RS-485 ways of communicating. So I think where I would want to end this presentation of this proposal would be, yeah, let's get that summary from Bob Fox into here. He walks through each one of these protocols, gives some history and some helpful advice as to how we should address each of the 3 protocols. But I think I wanted to end kind of on these decisions, zoom out a little bit, and just, let the working group know that this is, I think, where we need to really focus a lot of our work moving forward. We meaning the subgroup, and the subgroup providing recommendations and proposal, including these decisions. Thank you.
Travis, thank you very much. This is Arthur. I just want to do a time check. Is that I have 23 minutes after 11, and we still have a few things to go over in terms of logistics on dealing with this. So if it's okay with everybody, we're just going to continue past 11:30 as necessary. Is that okay, Margie? They're not going to cut us off?
That works. That works for me. I don't know what other people's schedules are, but I think that would be, if there's comments on this proposal or this discussion, would be great to get those now. Or if you don't have a chance today, you can either put them in chat or raise your hand. And then Travis, we don't have another meeting scheduled of the subgroup. My intent was to put this document in with the draft report and let it be worked on and commented in that format, unless you feel the ability to bring the subgroup together to work some more details.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. Question. So the essence is allow each of the 3 protocols to be used, implement this interoperability in phases. First, for just as Midhut points out, the autonomous functions that will be the default settings for inverters, that's the separate proposal that you will see in the report. And that will occur immediately because we realize that utility communication and control systems or interactive interoperability systems are not of the place where they can even see many of these resources currently. So autonomous functions, those get put in place by default. We work on the monitoring and looking and learning so utilities can see these resources over time, then through perhaps pilot programs, work on the interactive abilities so that these systems can more dynamically support grid functions. So that's sort of the proposal in a nutshell in lay terms from my perspective. But any comments from folks at this point? And I think we'll give maybe 5 minutes and then we'll wrap up and keep people only 10 minutes past their our allotted time.
This is Brian. I'm not sure if this would go back to that first section on where things apply in the rule, but I think there's maybe some specificity needed in terms of how these requirements interact with the interoperability requirements or SCADA requirements, telemetry requirements, whatever they may be called in the rule itself. And I apologize, I don't recall if there is a section in the proposed rule about telemetry requirements, but oftentimes, telemetry is only required over a megawatt. And I don't know if that's in the rule or if it's determined utility by utility. But there's a bit of a question, if are these things actually going to be used for those requirements when telemetry is required? And if telemetry is not required, it goes back to my earlier question, I guess, does this apply to all size systems in order to be able to be retroactively applied if in the future that telemetry requirement then gets reduced in size, or that applies to all systems, and or should that question of what those requirements apply to be addressed when that requirement is also changed?
Yeah, Brian, this is Arthur. It is not likely at all that telemetry is going to be addressed in the current interconnection rule because we have no record on that. It is something that could go into the TIR, and as this whole area evolves, I would imagine that in a couple of years, the commission is going to find a need to revisit the interconnection rule anyway, and that at that point it may have a whole interoperability section. But for the time being, that's a bridge that we'll cross when we get to it.
Understood. So is today's practice do the individual utilities determine at what threshold systems must have SCADA or telemetry?
Throw that to our utility engineers.
Yeah, short
Ty,
answer
John.
is yes. Yeah, I think each utility has a different threshold for that. And it's usually like somewhere between 0.5 megawatt and 1 megawatt. At least my understanding.
Yeah, this is Travis with SPS. I agree with that statement, and I agree with Brian. That we need to consider telemetry requirements as we move forward with these communication protocols. I believe from my experience, it's actually we have it pretty low. I think like 250 kilowatts, and I think it's also in the rules for the various states as well. So I think it depends on what state we're talking about as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was included in the current rules because a lot of other states do include that. But yeah, if it's not already in the proposed rule, then it's a question for the future, I guess.
Yeah, let's be careful about use of the word rule, right? In our context, the rule is of the formal articulation of policy by the commission that takes the effect of law. And really what we're talking about are technical requirements at this point.
Yeah, what I'm referring to though is the rule of what telemetry threshold, what the telemetry threshold is, and other states do address that in a rule. So that's why I was wondering if it was addressed.
Yeah, but so it sounds like Sean or Travis or Tracy, correct us wrong. It sounds like New Mexico does not currently have a rule in place about the size requirements requiring telemetry. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is Travis with SPS. You're asking about New Mexico, Margie?
Yep.
Yeah, we need to find that out.
Okay.
I think Art indicated that it's not, but yeah, let's see if there's just any telemetry requirements mentioned in the proposed rule update for the New Mexico Commission. Yeah. Yeah, I think Brian's point is like, hey, let's check out what we have for telemetry requirements, if anything, and just move forward knowing that.
Okay.
Yeah, I am 99% sure that we don't, because I have gone over that document a zillion times, and telemetry is not a word that appears.
Nice.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you. So I'm going to invite anybody with additional thoughts about this to provide comments on the language that's written up that you received yesterday in this proposal. What you will see, though, in a week from today, on August the 4th, you will see that wording incorporated into the report, the draft report. So it might be more efficient for you to collect some of your thoughts and then give us your comments on in a red line format in the report draft that will come out to you on the 4th. And then we will address all of the major comments that get raised in that. That will be the agenda for our meeting on August the 11th.
Okay, let's prepare for the possibility that we might need 90 minutes for that session.
I think that's a great idea, Arthur.
Yeah, I second that motion.
Okay, we'll plan for that to start still at 10:30 then. And as you can see, I again want to thank Travis and John, Tracy, Jerry, and Michael for working on that proposal. And I see that Jim, you've got your hand up. Please go ahead, Jim.
Yes, thank you. I just want to clarify that there's going to be another report draft that's going to be provided. That's the one that we would be expected to make any comments that we have on.
That's correct, Jim. And this
Okay.
content that Travis and John, Tracy, and Michael just prepared and presented will be incorporated into that report. And that way we can start looking at synchronizing these things together, the autonomous functions and functionality with the communications, or maybe some things that have to be integrated between those two. And I think having them all in one document would be a better way to read, review, and manage that. So they will all be included in the version that you'll get on August the 4th.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification.
Sure. So we will schedule the August 11th to be 90 minutes long. The agenda will be focused on reviewing comments that people have on the report, which includes the 2 subgroup proposals, one on categories, functions, and settings, and one on communications protocols. I would ask that you bring those comments. I think I'll make the due date for those will be the meeting time. Anything that you have in advance will help us set up the agenda. But if you can have your comments done by the time we meet on the 11th, I will enlist your help in raising issues real time in that meeting that you believe need to be addressed by the group. And I will also look at anything that comes in ahead of time to see what major issues we need to discuss. I know there are a few already that need to be addressed by the group, and I'll draft an agenda for that. But if you bring any comments to the meeting on the 11th and send them to me before the meeting, that would be terrific. sorry, that wasn't very clear, but I want you to bring content to the meeting on the 11th that is issue you think needs to be discussed, and we'll manage it that way. We'll spend 90 minutes there, and then we'll do the same process the following 2 weeks. So that's 2 iterations of this report, and then a final review by this group on the 8th of September before we finalize the report to go to the commission. So with that as our plan, let me ask first if there are any questions, and then I'll go to Arthur and Chair Hall in case they have any concluding remarks. So first, are there questions at this point? All right, Arthur, would you like to add any remarks?
No, just thank you very much, and thanks in particular for kind of like the subgroup working on these things. I think that the message that we sent is that we're not ready to make final decisions on a lot of this stuff because it is an evolving technical field. We want to provide the utilities with as much flexibility as necessary, but also keep in mind that you know, there's a pathway here, and the intent of this is preparing for markets of the future. So we don't want to close off the possibilities. We do want to make sure that we give directions to the industry, right? The makers of the advanced inverters, that these functionalities are going to be important. It's not just New Mexico, it's other states that are following this. So we're treading that fine line here. Where we want to keep things open and possible without boxing ourselves into a particular technological choice. So I think that at least what I've heard of this proposal kind of fits that criteria, and we'll see how the commission deals with it.
Well, and I will add in this learning journey that it looks like Travis had to hop off, but Travis offered the idea when we talked last week about having more tutorials and series of workshops of the especially utility and equipment folks getting together as we learn more about how this interactive system is going to work. It's going to evolve, and it's not going to be overnight. So being able to share information as we evolve down this path is going to be very important. So keep that in mind as well. Travis has some ideas about that I'll ask him to put down and share with the group separately. So we're on our continued journey of learning with this. So thank you all for being here. And Chair Hall, do you have anything you would like to add as we conclude this week's meeting?
Yeah, I don't want to keep everybody, but I do want to, like Arthur did, thank everybody for continuing to stay involved. And you know what I was reflecting on today as I was listening was how everybody sounds so cooperative. I know it probably hasn't always been that way, but there's really a struggle to try to get the right concepts in and get the right concepts out and talk about them before they go into the rule. And it's clearly a continuing education process. And what you just said about some people wanting to continue, I guess it was Travis Dorr, wanting to have continuing opportunities for people to share information and stuff, I think is a great idea. And I'd be happy for, that to occur, under the commission's auspices, or if there's any way we could help, formalize something like that going forward. I think that would probably be a really critical piece for a smoother long-term transition. So I just think this process has been a real wonderful opportunity for shared thinking in a productive way for an excellent goal. And I just really admire everybody who stays and works. And, if there's further process we can support for continuing education at the commission, I want to reassure everybody I'll advance that as long as we're here, as long as I'm there anyhow. So thanks.
Great. Thank you, Chair Hall. And thanks to everyone again for hanging in there. And we will see you again in 2 weeks, and you'll hear from me in a week with an updated draft report to review. Thank you again.
Great.